June 12, 1970, a courtroom in downtown Sydney fell silent as the prosecutor unveiled a thin, ink-stained strip of paper, its curved ridge promising to reveal the darkest secrets of a man's mind. The document, known only as the Sydney Line, claimed that the shape of a palm could diagnose criminality, insanity, and even predict a person's ultimate fate. It was a relic of an era when phrenology, palmistry, and other pseudosciences still whispered in the corridors of medical institutions. But on that day, it became the centerpiece of a legal battle that would expose the thin line between science and quackery. The story of the Sydney Line begins in the late 1960s, a time when Australia was wrestling with the aftershocks of World War II and the rapid expansion of its public health system. In the bustling suburbs of Sydney, a charismatic figure named Dr. Leonard "Len" Whitaker rose to notoriety. Whitaker, a self-styled neurodiagnostician, had trained as a neurologist before abandoning mainstream medicine for the allure of fringe theories. He was fascinated by the work of Franz Joseph Gall and Johann Spurzheim, the 19th century pioneers of phrenology, and he saw an opportunity to revive their ideas in a modern guise. Whitaker's breakthrough, or his greatest deception, was the creation of a single, supposedly universal line drawn across the palm. He called it the Sydney Line, and he argued that its curvature, depth, and distance from the wrist corresponded to specific brain regions associated with aggression, impulsivity, and psychosis. In a series of sensational newspaper articles, Whitaker claimed that a simple, inexpensive palm reading could replace costly psychiatric evaluations, and that the line could even predict recidivism among prisoners. The promise of a quick, cheap diagnostic tool appealed to a government strained by rising mental health costs, and soon the New South Wales Department of Health authorized a pilot program in 3 juvenile detention centers. The pilot produced headlines. A 16-year-old named Michael Harris, arrested for a series of shoplifting incidents, was declared highly predisposed to violent behavior after Whitaker traced his Sydney Line. Harris was transferred to a high-security facility and placed under intensive monitoring, while his parents were warned that any future misstep could trigger irreversible psychiatric intervention. Within months, Harris was involved in a violent altercation that left another inmate seriously injured. Whitaker seized the moment, proclaiming his method vindicated, while critics whispered that the line had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Public outcry grew when a prominent psychiatrist, Dr. Evelyn Morris, published a paper in the Australian Journal of Psychiatry exposing fundamental flaws in Whitaker's methodology. Morris demonstrated that the line's position varied dramatically with hand size, skin elasticity, and even the pressure of the ink pen. Moreover, she highlighted the absence of any statistical correlation between the line and documented psychiatric diagnoses. Despite her evidence, Whitaker's supporters, bolstered by a network of private clinics that charged families for Sydney Line assessments, pressed the government to continue the program. The tide turned in March 1971, when a tragic accident forced the courtroom into the national spotlight. A 22-year-old woman named Claire Beaumont, diagnosed with severe depression, had been evaluated using the Sydney Line and deemed low risk for self-harm. She was released from psychiatric care, only to take her own life 2 weeks later. An inquest was launched, and the coroner's report listed misdiagnosis due to unvalidated diagnostic methods as a contributing factor. The case sparked a formal investigation by the Australian Medical Board, which summoned Whitaker to testify. The trial that followed was less a courtroom drama than a clash of epistemologies. Prosecutors presented the autopsy report of Claire Beaumont, the original palm scans, and expert testimony from Dr. Morris, who explained the statistical impossibility of Whitaker's claims. Whitaker's defense relied on character witnesses, former patients who swore they had found peace of mind in his readings, and on a handful of anecdotal successes, such as a convicted burglar who allegedly reformed after being labeled low aggression by the line. The turning point arrived when the prosecution called Dr. Harold Singh, a forensic pathologist, to discuss the autopsy findings. Singh revealed that Beaumont's brain showed no structural abnormalities, and that the chemical imbalances associated with her depression could only be detected through biochemical assays, not palm lines. He went on to demonstrate, using a series of blind tests, that any practitioner could draw a Sydney line on a random palm and produce a diagnosis that appeared plausible but was statistically indistinguishable from random guessing. When the jury withdrew, the verdict was unanimous. Dr. Leonard Whitaker was found guilty of professional misconduct, fraud, and reckless endangerment. He received a 3-year suspension of his medical license and was ordered to pay restitution to the families affected by his assessments. The court also mandated the immediate cessation of all Sydney line testing across the state, and the Department of Health issued a formal apology to those harmed. In the weeks that followed, an exhaustive autopsy of the Sydney line itself was conducted, not a physical organ, but a forensic analysis of the practices, the anatomy. Researchers dissected the original pamphlets, tracing the origins of the line back to a 1965 article in a fringe occult magazine. They found that Whitaker had borrowed the concept from a Japanese palmistry tradition known as Tsuchai Kaku, where a single line was believed to indicate earthly burden. By rebranding it as a neurological marker, Whitaker had effectively weaponized mysticism for profit. The aftermath rippled through Australian medical policy. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.